presents a true story based on the actual experiences of American clergymen, pastor, priest, or rabbi. The men who give inspiration and guidance to people at the crossroads of life. Tonight, The Miracle of Faith, starring Conrad Nagel in the story of Dr. John Ellis Large, now of New York City.
Saved her life, Doctor.
Did I?
Tumor of that size at the base of her spine. How long would she have had to live?
I'm sure the operation was justified, nurse. What I meant to say is that perhaps we've only saved part of Mrs. Carpenter's life.
A life is a life, Doctor.
Not always. Sometimes it's a prison. The body can be a very narrow and confining cell when it can no longer move.
You're certain Mrs. Carpenter's paralyzed?
We'll know in a few days. You didn't feel anything, Mrs. Carpenter?
Or should I have? Then I'm paralyzed.
I'm sorry.
Is that all my doctor has to offer me? Sympathy?
A little more in this case. A shred of hope.
A shred?
The spinal cord wasn't severed in the operation, Mrs. Carpenter. It was damaged unavoidably. It may heal, it may not. But there's hope.
Hello, Dr. Morton.
I'd better have a talk with you, Paul.
That won't be necessary, Doctor. I'm quite capable of discussing this matter with my son and his wife.
Excuse me.
What is it, Mother?
The doctor has just told me, Paul. My limbs are paralyzed. Permanently.
Permanently? There's no hope at all?
Well, that's what Mother said, didn't she?
Sorry, it's just so hard to believe.
Mother, I don't want you to worry about a thing. We have a room already at home for you. As soon as you're able to leave the hospital, you're coming with us. We'll look after you.
That's a pretty large statement, son. I'll have to be waited on hand and foot.
Well, that's no more than fair. After all, who took care of me when I had the mumps and measles? What is it now, Mother?
Help me off with this sweater. The heat in this room is just unbearable.
20 minutes ago, you were freezing.
I can't help it if it's off one minute and on the next.
There you are.
Paul, I want to sit up a little more. You know, this bed is very uncomfortable.
Mother, if you would just take the doctor's advice and try your wheelchair, why, you could be out of bed most of the day.
I thought we'd settle that argument. I'm much too weak to use that wheelchair. Besides, who would help me in and out of bed? Marion? She begrudges every little thing she does for me already.
Paul, thanks for staying with Mother. I simply had to get some food in the house.
Well, that's okay. Well, I'll go on down to the office and let you two girls go to work.
Goodbye, Paul.
Bye, Mother. Honey, I'll take these out in the kitchen for you.
Oh, thank you.
It took you long enough. Paul's been through with his lunch for half an hour. He'll be late getting back to his office.
You know how markets are. I had to wait in line at the check stand.
Aren't there such things anymore as grocers who deliver?
Of course, but they have to charge more. Now, it's time for your exercise.
Time. I thought it was late.
I'm sorry, Mother, that I was delayed at the market. I'm sure a half hour can't make any great difference.
I'm sure it doesn't to you.
Mother, please, can't we just forget it?
That would be a very desirable solution for you, wouldn't it, Marion? To just forget. Forget I'm here at all. That I have to depend on you for everything.
Mother.
Just think of the hours. Week in and week out, you stand here just exercising my legs for me. Why? What good does it do?
Dr. Morton says it keeps up the muscle tone. It may help re-educate the nerves.
What difference does it make? I'll never walk again.
We don't know that.
I know it. And I'm the one who's lying here. Lying, having my feet waved in the air as though I were a 2-year-old.
Do you want me to stop?
Yes, stop. And leave me alone. Just because I'm helpless, there's no reason I should submit to every indignity.
This isn't my idea, Mother. Dr. Morton is the one.
He's the man who crippled me, isn't he? What good is his opinion? Do I have to lie here and listen to what he says? I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Dr. Morton. And you and Paul. You're the ones who wanted this operation.
No, Mother. The only thing we wanted was for you to live. The operation had to be performed. 5 doctors, all specialists, told us that.
And Paul believed them. He let them do this to me.
No, Mother. He did what he thought was right. What was right.
In other words, you knew it was right. You influenced Paul.
You've made it impossible for me to influence Paul about anything. I'm still the evil influence?
Well, I told her it was my decision. I don't know what else I can say or what I can do. It's a crazy idea, Marion. She's bound to get over it. We've got to make allowances, honey.
I have made allowances, Paul. Your mother's been living with us over a year now. I've been content to wait on her, to go to school, to learn how to take care of her. I don't expect gratitude, Paul. But just once in a while, a kind word goes a long way with me. Now I'm the one who crippled her.
Oh, look. You're taking this altogether too emotionally. It'll all be forgotten in a day or two.
Well, if it is, there'll be something else.
What do you expect me to do? Put my mother away in a home?
I'm not telling you what to do, Paul. It's just that I've had all I can take. Frankly, Dr. Lodge, I hope I haven't been wasting your time. I've tried to be honest with you, but I don't think there's anything you or anyone can do for my mother-in-law short of healing her, and that's impossible.
Is it?
I've told you the medical history.
Yes, but we won't let that color our thinking. God's healing power is not bound by man's limited science.
But before God can heal anyone, isn't it necessary that they believe in his ability to heal?
It helps, but even an agnostic can benefit from his father's compassion.
You believe that you can heal my husband's mother?
I can't heal anyone, Mrs. Carpenter. God is the healer.
Come in.
Hello, I'm John Large. I'm an Episcopalian priest and a friend of your daughter-in-law's.
How do you do?
May I come in?
Of course. I hope you'll excuse my appearance. I don't have many visitors.
Marion's been telling me a good deal about your trouble. She thought I might be able to help you.
Well, I don't know how. I haven't been to church in 30 years, and I see no reason why I should get religious now.
Time for your medicine.
Water. Oh. I think at least you might have told me you invited this gentleman to see me, Marion.
Well, I meant to, but Paul and I started talking the moment he came home, and it went right out of my head.
And, of course, it also was a splendid opportunity to embarrass me.
I knew you twisted into something like that. I'm sorry, Dr. Large. I told you it was a waste of time.
It seems to me you might preach a little Christianity to her, Dr. Large. She's not exactly overflowing with Christian charity toward me or her husband.
Well, I intend to do everything I can to help Mary, Mrs. Carpenter. But your case is much more serious.
Really?
Yes, you're suffering from an inability to love and to be loved. Let me ask you something. Do you believe in God?
Dr. Large, I stopped going to church when I was 15, and I wasn't very interested then. If God does exist, I don't imagine he's inclined to worry about someone who has ignored him all her life and then runs to him when she's in trouble.
Well, that's where you're wrong, Mrs. Carpenter. God doesn't hold grudges for anyone who comes to him with true repentance in his heart.
How does a person do that?
Well, becoming an active member of the church would help. Of course, that would involve some instruction from me and some study on your part.
Study? At my age? Now you're being foolish, Doctor.
Oh, no. I've seen lots of people study Christianity at your age, Mrs. Carpenter. It's the most interesting subject in the world because it changes people. It'll change you, too, I guarantee it.
It won't change the one thing I want to change. These dead legs.
It could do that, too. God heals, Mrs. Carpenter.
Have you ever seen anyone healed?
Many people. There was one woman who was almost totally blind. Regained her sight. Only last week I baptized an infant. The doctors had given him 2 hours to live. Within an hour after the baptism, his fever had gone down from 105 to normal. He was out of danger.
Is that what you mean by a miracle?
Some people might call it that.
Dr. Morton. Dr. Morton, this is Dr. Large.
Dr. Morton's pleasure. How do you do?
Dr. Large, I understand, proposes to cure my mother through spiritual healing.
I don't propose to do anything, Dr. Morton. But there is the possibility that God, not I, may heal her.
Dr. Morton, don't you feel that encouraging my mother to pray for something like that could be, well, very dangerous?
Why?
My mother's already seriously depressed. When her prayers aren't answered, she might give up completely.
I don't agree with you. No one in her situation who prays or even attempts to pray is worse off for the effort. And how do you know her prayers won't be answered?
I can see how prayer or spiritual counseling might help someone with a psychosomatic problem, Doctor. But I'm not convinced that's what we're dealing with here.
God, as I understand it, doesn't dispense his miracles on an everyday basis, even though you and Marion may think so.
He would if we had the faith to ask his help without staggering in our hearts, as Jesus says.
Dr. Large, my mother's problem is physical. All the faith in the world can't change it.
Your mother lives in a state of constant despair, Mr. Carpenter. That's not a physical problem.
Well, Dr. Large is right there, Paul. I've been trying to get her in a wheelchair for 6 months, but she wants to stay as completely helpless as she can get.
Dr. Morton, who is more qualified to deal with all my mother's problems? You or Dr. Large?
No, that's a false question, Mr. Carpenter. There's no opposition between Dr. Morton and me. His knowledge is just as important to her health as any spiritual assistance that I may be able to bring to her. I work constantly with many doctors.
I think it's stupid to deprive your mother of the kind of help she needs most, Paul, just because I happen to be the one who brought Dr. Large here.
Now, don't tell me you're concerned, Marion.
If you'll excuse me.
Dr. Morton, do you have any objections to all of this?
No objections. I do question spiritual healing, however, if you don't mind my being blunt, Dr. Large.
I'll tell my mother you're here.
If you can talk Mrs. Carpenter into a wheelchair, now consider that a grade A miracle.
Dr. Morton, that may be the beginning of a very profound idea. I lay my hands upon thee in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, beseeching the mercies of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all pain and illness being put to flight, the blessings of health may be restored to thee. Amen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Large.
Can't accept it yet, can you, Mrs. Carpenter? The principle that prayer heals. The words I just said, somehow they're not enough, are they? It's far too uncomplicated.
I suppose everything seems complicated until you understand it.
Unfortunately, Miss Carpenter, the first step can't be in the direction of understanding. The subject of God and his love is far too involved for the human mind to understand it with one exposure, or even 100. Maybe why we have agnostics. They can't see God, they can't feel him, so he can't exist. That's why we start with acceptance and faith. That's why we must pray together. And that's why we ask you to join our church.
Belonging to a church implies attendance, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, then I'm afraid you'll have to reverse your formula if it's going to do me any good. I'm in no position to be an active member of any group.
You won't be the first person, Mrs. Carpenter, nor the only one to attend our services in a wheelchair.
Now you're trying to get me into that wheelchair again.
I think that's a logical move.
This has been a very interesting discussion, but I'd like to go to sleep now. Perhaps we can talk again at another time.
Of course we can, Miss Carpenter. Good night.
Good night.
Now.
Mother, I'm sorry you're being subjected to these visits. Things are difficult enough for you.
My medicine, Paul. It's almost time for it. Would you fix it for me, please?
Of course.
You know, Dr. Large is a very devout man, Paul. Now, he's only doing what he feels is right. I'm sure I'm no worse off for our talks. I hope Marion is a bit more satisfied now that I'm seeing him.
There you are. Well, when she told me she was going to talk to a lawyer about a divorce, nothing was said about involving you. Frankly, I resent it. If she wants a divorce, that's between the two of us. She can do what she pleases any time she pleases. I suppose you heard that. Well?
I'll pack a bag.
Well, that's the end of the chapter. It's been a long time coming, Mother. It had to happen. It's nobody's fault. It's just better this way. Better than trying to live with something that isn't good and trying to cover it up.
I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't want to come between you.
Don't let this upset you, Mother. We haven't lost anything we can't live without. You try and get some sleep now. Good night, Mother. If you want anything during the night, just call me.
Good night. Thank you, son. Yes?
Anything you need, Mother?
I've been listening to you pace the floor all night long, Paul. There's a board in the floor that creaks.
Oh, I hadn't noticed it. I'm sorry.
No, Paul. I'm sorry that this is so difficult for you.
Mother, I told you last night it had nothing to do with you. Just give me a little time to get used to the idea. I'll be fine. Oh, if you don't need anything for a little while, I'm going to take a walk around the block.
Paul. You love Marion, don't you? Oh, dear God, help me. Let me do it. Let me do it. Oh, thank you, God. Oh, thank you. Information. I want the telephone number of a Dr. Large. He's the rector of the Church of the Heavenly Rest. If you won't invite me in, at least get out of my way. I'm a woman driver. Next time you pick a hotel, Marion, get one that doesn't have so many steps. Doctor nearly worked himself to death trying to get me into this place.
Mrs. Carpenter, what are you doing here?
I'm crawling, Marion. Paul doesn't want a divorce any more than you do. He just told me.
If that's true, why didn't he come and tell me himself?
Well, for the same reason you don't speak to him. And it isn't only foolish, it's sinful. Good Lord, I've been a Christian for only 60 days, and I hate to start preaching like a plaster saint, but don't you think it's important to forgive people?
Where's Paul?
He went for a walk about an hour ago, just as it got late. I think it would be nice if you were there when he returned.
Does he want me?
If he didn't say. But he didn't have to, Marion. I heard him pace the floor all night long. I saw his face this morning. He wants you there. And so do I.
Mrs. Carpenter's taken a giant step forward, Marion. The next step is up to you.
How long has it been since I began to pray for healing, Dr. Large?
Several months.
Yes. And I've thanked God every day. I can move my legs, Marion. I can stand up. Well, say a prayer of thanks to God.
Mrs. Carpenter, that's the most wonderful thing I've ever seen in my life.
Well, I don't think you ladies need a referee after all.
Perhaps Paul is still the same man. Perhaps I'm still an invalid, but I've been healed of the fear of being an invalid. I have had a demonstration of the healing power of prayer. And that isn't all, Marion. I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk.
We better hurry. If Paul's been out walking all morning, he'll be hungry for his breakfast.
Next week, Chevrolet, in behalf of your local authorized Chevrolet dealer, presents another dramatic story based on the actual experiences of American clergymen on Crossroads. In just a moment, you'll see next week's star, Arthur Franz. Stories for Crossroads are selected by our Board of Advisors, Captain Maurice M. Witherspoon, Father George B. Ford, and Dr. William F. Rosenblum.